What's up, everybody? Ghost Bros Gaming, Steven here. Today is a very, very special day because Tier Limit has officially been nuked from orbit by the ban list. I think this does a lot for the Labrynth strategy, actually. Number one, we don't have to play a bunch of main deck cards like Shifter just to counter tier. We can actually play cards that are good in the Labrynth strategy. And two, I think we have a really good matchup into Kashtira and Branded, which will probably be some of the best decks in the upcoming format. So today I'm going to be going through my deck profile for Post-Banlist, Post-Photon Hypernova. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. As always, please like and subscribe. Let's get right into it.
Ghost Bros Gaming.
Okay, so looking through the deck profile, nothing too different as far as your standard Labrynth card ratios. You're playing 3 Lady, she's cracked. You're playing 1 Lovely, she actually gets a lot better in my opinion because she's no longer dead in the hand or graveyard, thanks to Big Welcome being able to summon from the hand or graveyard. You're running triple Ariana, she still facilitates a lot of the degenerate stuff the deck can do. I'm actually on 2 Coup Clock for now. I really like how he speeds up the deck. This is how I'm using one of my deck slots that's been freed up by the lack of D-Shifter. I'm running a 2nd Coup Clock. It's actually kind of nice to be able to, especially now that we have Big Welcome, being able to activate Big Welcome on your turn 1 and then really pop off a lot of times. Like I was pretty consistently getting to a hand rip for 2 from Lovely. So you hand rip once on your turn, 1 hand rip again on their turn. And this gets a lot better because Tier would get off on getting hand ripped, but most other decks in the format won't. So I think this becomes a lot more viable. I'm on 3 Extrav. You can be on Prosperity. I just, don't want to shell out for Prosperities. And I think given that my go second strategy is more focused around Waybridge, Strike, Goes and Match, I don't necessarily need to dig for like the exact Lava Golem or Evenly Matched. If you were running Lava Golem Evenly Matched in the main potentially as a go second strategy, you'd probably want Prosperity to dig. But Extrav is a pure +1. I don't think you can go wrong here. I did take Duality out because I found myself wanting to special summon on my turn 1 a lot more than I had previously, which makes sense, right? Big Welcome is just so good on turn 1 now, so we have a lot more stuff to do on turn 1, so you don't want to lock yourself out of special summoning for the turn. The one Labrynth, this gets a lot better. Obviously, you've got 3 more copies of Welcome Labrynth to proc your stuff. Triple Compulse, no change here. Still the best removal trap that we have, so it's Big Welcome. We got the one Daruma just to out any like towers or anything that's unaffected. It's also really good into Kashtira. It shuts down all their effects. It's basically your Book of Eclipse. This is going to be the card of our format, I think, D-Barrier. So if we think about what the best decks in the format will be, it's going to be Kashtira, Branded, Sword Soul, all of these decks all have one thing in common, and that is that they get absolutely destroyed by D-Barrier. Like Kashtira Call Xyz, Branded Call Fusion, Sword Soul Call Synchro, pass turn. Like that's pretty much their turn. And so I actually could even make the case, I think, for running this at 2. It is still quite searchable, so I'm still testing it at 1. It's been fine so far at 1. Ice Dragon's Prison, this can actually come back now because the shufflers will be limited, so there's a lot less likelihood that this gets interrupted, and you're not running Necro Valley or Shifter, so there's a lot more chance that stuff will be in the graveyard for you to use with this, so I think this card gets better. Triple Imperm, I think this card also becomes really good now. Like before, you can Imperm a Kit Kalos for tier, but it doesn't really matter that much. However, if you Imperm a Shangri-Ira from Kashtira, like that's pretty much going to be their turn. Like they're not going to be able to do much else. So I think Imperm gets much stronger. So I'm running Triple Imperm just to help with going second. It's also good going first. It's also a normal trap, so a lot of synergies there. Tears of the Overroot, I think since we're not running Necro Valley anymore, this also gets really good. This card is honestly kind of cracked. Like you can, any continuous spell or field spell, you can stop with this as well because it's just a card that it sends. So I think this is really good. Double Waybridge, unfortunately, this will not proc your Labrynth monster effects since your opponent is doing the sending. However, I think this card is just too strong. Like the matchups, like it doesn't really have a bad matchup, right? Going second, this card is so good. If your opponent builds their entire board, you just set this and a strike potentially, or set this and it goes in and pass, and then their draw phase, you flip this and bam, board broken, and they don't even get any effects, like any floating effects that they would if monsters get destroyed. So it's really, really good, I think. Triple welcome, this is obvious. I think obviously big welcome is better, but just being able to draw into welcome Labrynth traps, honestly, drawing welcome and big welcome turn 1 is really, really good. Like it's really degenerate how much advantage you can crank out just from those 2 cards. Triple Gozen, I'm off Rivalry mainly because Kashtira will be Psychic only, so they're not really going to get hurt. Well, they have some machines, but they're not going to get hurt that much by Rivalry. They will, however, get hurt a lot by Gozen. Same thing, like Branded is okay with Gozen. Sword Soul gets destroyed with Gozen. So I think Gozen does more to all of those decks than Rivalry does. So I'm on Triple Gozen. And then taking the Rivalry spot, we have Skill Drain. So Skill Drain, now that Tier is no longer a threat, and I do think Tier, there were some iterations of Tier in the OCG that were seeing success, but only 1 copy of each Fusion Trigger and only 1 Miller, only 1 of each Ishizu card and 1 Kit Kalos should be enough, I believe, to take the deck out of contention for the most part. But that said, I think now that we aren't in danger of things getting popped with Pearl or Rhino and the best decks don't do a ton with the graveyard, I think Skill Drain gets really, really good in this format. And Big Welcome lets you dodge Skill Drain to an extent because you're bouncing your monsters, so they could resolve in the hand. Even if you activate them on the field, as long as they're in the hand at resolution, then they can get their effects. So I think Skill Drain makes a ton of sense now going into this format. And then I'm still on Triple Strike. I really like Strike. So there's a couple things that I think it does really well. It's cracked going second because it has a higher spell speed than any monster effect negates. So let's say you set a Waybridge and a Strike and your opponent has 1 spell trap negate or 1 omni negate on board, or even 5 omni negates on board on a monster. It really doesn't matter. You flip Waybridge, they try to negate, you flip Strike, it's a higher spell speed than monster effects, so the chain is resolving right there unless they have a counter trap, which they typically don't. So I think Strike is really good in that respect, and it's also really, really good at stopping things like Zeus, because you can strike an inherent Xyz summon. So a lot of times what I've found is when I go first and set up a big established spell trap board, my opponent, if they have access, will probably try to Zeus me. And so from that, especially because you're probably gonna have a lady in defense mode, which just makes you like a very, very easy Zeus target. And Strike, you let them attack with their Xyz monster, you let them overlay the Zeus, and you just strike it as soon as it comes out, and that's that. So I really think that having the Zeus protection with Solemn Strike as well as the Go Second makes this card just like really, really good for us. Okay, so let's get into the extra deck. So I am making an intentional choice here. You may notice that this extra deck is quite strange looking. Like there's no, it basically looks like a Dark World extra deck, and that is intentional. So essentially, like the theory that some folks have been talking about, and I definitely agree with, is that we almost need to have a smokescreen as another deck for the next format. So what's going to happen is Kashtira will activate their Diablosis. They're going to look into your extra deck. So let's say you lose dice roll to Kashtira. If they look in your extra deck and see like a bunch of Dogmatica punishment targets like Entis and Garura, they're going to know you're playing some kind of back row deck, and they're going to go full combo and lock all 5 of your back row, at which point you're essentially dead, right? Like you've just lost the game in turn 0. However, I think that if we smokescreen as another extra deck or as another deck like archetype, then they would potentially lock the monster zones as opposed to the spell trap zones, right? So if my opponent looks at this extra deck, they're going to think I'm running Dark World. And so what would they do if they think I'm running Dark World? They're going to lock all of my monster zones. And so once that happens, they pass to me. I set 5, I set my Waybridge, I set my Skill Drain, I set my Gozen Match, I set my D Barrier, I set 5 cards and then pass to them and break their board on the next turn. And so I think, obviously that's not going to help you in games 2 and 3, but the ability to, when you lose dice roll, have literally any non-zero chance of not just losing to Kashtira in game 1, I think makes it well worth potentially running this strategy for your extra deck. Obviously, you can't run things like Dogmatica Punishment. It's not really worth it. However, I don't think Dogmatica Punishment's that good in this format anyway, just because there's going to be Banish synergy running around with Kashtira anyway. So I'm not sure Punishment is that worth it. I think the chance to not immediately auto lose to Kashtira is well worth like sacrificing the good punishment targets. So I'm doing Dark World, and the reason for that is because all the like Welcome Labrynth, it'll lock you into Fiends, and so Dark World is basically the extra deck that would have the most Fiends in it that we could potentially make use of. I think this is like, honestly, even that is like marginal utility at best. I have never summoned any of these Fiends, not a single time, because most of the time you just want your Labrynth cards face up on the board, proccing their effects and netting you advantage. However, I mean, we may as well, if we have the ability to smokescreen as a deck and still use a lot of the extra deck monsters, I think we should do it. So I'm going with Dark World for now. If you find that your opponents aren't buying this and they're still like locking your spell and trap, you could potentially do like Branded or something else. Just pick a deck that has a bunch of cheap and obvious extra deck monsters. So if your opponent sees 3 Mirror Jade, 3 Albion, they're probably going to think you're on Branded. So, and all those cards are in a structure deck. They're super cheap. So yeah, this one, this is all theory right now. I haven't played against any Kashtira, so I really don't know how this will turn out. However, I do think it has the potential to be a very big advantage for us in the coming format. As far as the side deck is concerned, there's a bunch of changes here. We're running Nibiru. I think this card is just too good in the next format not to run. Like, it was already creeping back into the format before the ban list, and with Tyr gone and Sprite most likely gone, like, this card is insane. So I think you have to play 3 Nib, especially like if you're going second game 3 against Kashtira. This and Lava Golem are going to be super strong. So Lava Golem for obvious reasons, best board breaker. Dogwood, I'm still on like these 3 just in case you go to time. However, our turns don't really take that long, and the locks that we set up on our opponents are so oppressive, where we're like looping D-Barrier against Branded, that typically I don't run into time with this deck actually, but I like keeping that thing on me. I hate losing in time. It's very frustrating, so I tend to just dedicate the 3 spaces to the Dogwood. We've got our Appointer. This is an amazing going first card. It's basically a 3rd or a 4th SJ, where, if you snipe the evenly matched out of their hand, they can't evenly match you. We got the Boo Boo game for the Spell Trap Destruction Blowout Punish, and we've got the Erad for Spell Trap Deck Punish. It's also insane in the mirror match. If you run into that, just call traps, that's game. And then, like, you can also potentially, like, since you can set any spell trap and activate it on your opponent's turn, you could, if they do the whole enter battle phase, and then they've got the evenly matched right before the end of the battle phase, you can Erad them for traps and snipe the evenly matched out of their hand. Or you could potentially call spells to kill Thrust, to kill Duster, all those kind of things. I think Erad's too good going first not to run. I'm not playing Deck Devi anymore because I am not really super concerned about Sprite and Floowandereeze. That may change depending on how the format shakes out, but for now I don't think it's worth the side deck slot. And then Triple SJ, this card's goated. If you're not running this, you're going to lose straight up. So anyway, that's my deck profile. This is a work in progress. Certainly, I think things will change as I actually get to testing this in the real world. But let me know in the comments if there's things you'd change. If you've had success with this sort of smokescreen strategy at all, I'm really interested to see how this plays out for us. Thanks for watching.